Hey everyone, I'm Luis Garcia, Chief Information Officer here at Onsite Technology. Welcome back to the Onsite Technology Podcast. Before we continue, I want to introduce two very important people here, our President, Lou Garcia, and our partner, Richard Rivera.
Lou here. Welcome back.
Richard here. Thank you for joining us.
So it's been a minute since we've had our last podcast episode. It's been 10 minutes actually. Quite a bit of time went by since our last podcast, and it's just difficult sometimes just getting our schedules aligned. And then the last time we ended up doing a podcast, we actually ran into technical difficulties with some of the equipment. But hey, that's usually what happens when you're just starting out, trying to get the feel for things. And I hope today we're doing a little better, although we did have a few technical difficulties at the beginning of this podcast too. So we're still ironing out the kinks, and we're hoping by the next podcast we have everything ironed out, so we don't have these issues anymore. We can start releasing these on a more frequent basis moving forward. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
This episode, we're looking to go into some penetration testing.
Did you say penitentiary?
Yes. Where were we?
You were going to the penitentiary.
Yeah, this episode, we're going to be going into penetration testing. Hopefully, this bring you some insight of what that's about, and maybe you have a good takeaway from our podcast today and learn something new, something that can help you and your business, and maybe even your home network.
Yeah, I guess we want to start off with what is penetration testing, and there's many definitions of this if you Google it, and be careful Googling it. You might go down the wrong path with that particular wording. In any case, penetration testing is kind of like hiring a burglar to purposely break into your house, and you're kind of hiring somebody that has the ins and outs of the business. They know the tips, tricks of the trade. They know all the secrets to be able to get around security layers, to be able to get in and out as easily as possible without being detected. It's kind of the same concept, but instead it is for your computer network. And it can even entail some social engineering where they can try to either grab passwords through email phishing, or they can figure out the corporate hierarchy of how all the employees are listed on, for example, LinkedIn. They can try to attack key specific people that are in higher positions, such as directors or managers, maybe even IT personnel. They may even try to send those phishing emails to those key personnel to get them to click on certain links, to get them to enter their password, to again try and circumvent some security measures that are in place. So penetration testing is kind of exactly that. You're essentially just simulating an attack. You're simulating. I don't want to call it a hack per se. I mean, it's kind of,
Tries to find your weak points.
yeah. You're trying to test the vulnerabilities to figure out what are the weak points in the network. And for all intents and purposes, a lot of compliance like NIST 800, CMMC, even cybersecurity insurance programs nowadays, they, for the most part, want to see you're at least doing this annually. So it's kind of,
Yeah, they want to make sure that you're, secure enough to be insured and protect themselves as well from hackers and ransomware, so they don't have to pay out. Who does wants to pay some ransomware nowadays, especially when they're asking for the millions? I'm sure your data is more important than some ransomware.
another thing I would probably call it too is it's a good gap analysis to see where you should be focusing funding and
Mhm.
resources in on your network. Perhaps there are some weak points that need more attention, whether that's password management, maybe you need multi-factor authentication for key people that are in the organization, or perhaps remote users. It's again, it's trying to look for gaps that are in the security, and this generates a report where it gives you a very in-depth analysis of where you should be focusing your attention on.
Yeah, there's a lot of common misconceptions about pen testing. They think it's just for like hackers only or only for big companies. It's really not. It's pretty for anyone. And some of the misconceptions people like to think about is it's just a virus scan or it's a fancy virus scan, and it really isn't. It's more than that. It's deep, like Lewis mentioned earlier. It's a deep analysis and finding where your weaknesses are, and plugging those holes if there's any issues found on the network during the scan. And it's not just for big companies. It's small companies, large companies, and there's even smaller scans you can even do for your home networks as well.
Whether your company's big or small, penetration testing is really for you
Yeah,
because you really need to find what your weaknesses are in your network, in your firewall, to try to prevent any malicious attacks.
yeah, and it's not something you do once either, and thinks that once it's a one and done thing. It's something that should be ongoing. Some company, depending on your size or what type of business you do, it's probably done maybe monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or or ongoing every year. Depends on your requirements. Sometimes your insurance as well, and or who you do business with. If you have to follow CMMCs, NIST, or your insurance provider might even require that it's done quarterly or annually or whatever. So it's not something that's just one and done. It's something that should be ongoing all the time in your environment.
And on top of that, insurance companies tend to look for them at least done annually, and they want to see a typically a copy of the report to have that on record that you're doing your due diligence. This way, if you put together a game plan and say, you know what, we did this gap analysis, we found out that we had these issues with our network, and here is the timeline. Let's say 3 months, 6 months, 9 months between now and the rest of the year, where we're going to address those issues. And I know this is gonna sound kinda weird, but you can technically be in compliance even though you're out of compliance, as long as you put together a game plan and have an outline of a timeline of when you're going to actually fix those issues. So, they wanna see that continuous feedback loop that you're being told, "Hey, these are the issues with your current network. These are the potential remediations, and this is how we're going to get there within 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, before the next annual penetration test for the following year." Now, it doesn't have to be annually. It can be done quarterly. It could be done monthly. It could be semi-annually. Um, we have different types of penetration testing, even here at Onsite Technology, that we're able to do. Some of our customers do them monthly, some quarterly, most just again to appease compliance and insurance purposes. They're doing them annually. And this way, at least gives them time throughout the year to put together a game plan, how they're going to fix them, as well as putting together a budget in case there are any additional layers need to be put in during that time.
Yeah, they want to do, and they also by seeing it annually, they want to see a comparison if anything was actually done from the year before, and that shows that you're doing somewhat due diligence in making your network secure and protecting your business.
We probably don't have to really talk too much about real world examples. I mean, I feel like it's almost every day or at least a few times a week. You always see some company in the news. I know Twitter was part of a big hack, now known as X. YouTube was part of a big hack. I think Meridian Health was part of one. Every week there's several of them that hit the news from these big time, high profile breaches, and those are just the ones you hear about. I mean, there's multiple times a day small businesses are being affected by this, and it's not so much what you think the data is going to be worth to someone else; it's what the data is worth to you.
To
Because
you.
once they get in the network and they're able to bypass your security measures and they're able to put ransomware in those machines and they encrypt that data where you can't even access your own data. That's the big issue. Now you're out of business, and that's pretty much the part that the compliance and the cyber insurance portion wants to look out for, because they're just looking, hey, I don't want to have to do a big payout from a claim on an insurance policy when if you were spending X amount of dollars more per month, you this could have been preventable.
Exactly. I mean, if you, especially if they hit something like your financial system, that does your billing and invoicing. How are you going to get paid if you don't know who to invoice? If you're retail, and you're doing shipments out and you're late, you get chargebacks that can cost you hundreds and thousands of dollars. So it's more like Lewis said, it's, how much that data is actually worth to you, not for what they can get from it.
Yeah, and in the news, you don't really hear the smaller businesses getting hit, right? It's just not big news. So I don't think there's really a number out there that really tells the whole story on smaller businesses. A lot of smaller businesses, they don't report it to the FBI. Um, they just try to recover whatever they can from the backups if they're able to recover from the backups. But like Lewis said, you only hear the big stories, the big
Yeah.
players where it's costing millions of dollars. That hits the big news. The little stuff that happens to little small businesses, you don't hear those. Very little. So it's important to understand the gravity of the situation of what's going on. You have these hackers uh, from Africa, from Asia. They have these boiler room operations where they have hundreds of people. They're constantly making calls and trying to hack into your network, into your emails, and what have you. And at the end of the day, they become successful. And they're probably rewarded for doing so because these are part of a much larger organization uh, that is hard to stop at this point.
The other big thing is one thing we've noticed with the recent proliferation of AI. These groups are starting to use AI to help automate some of these processes for them. They're using AI to fast track doing email drafts for email phishing. They're using them to help automate email scraping off of different networks such as LinkedIn and Facebook. They're trying to obviously automate as much as they can on their end to get a successful hit, to get a payday. And AI is making it easier for them, right? Obviously, we're using AI as well when it comes to cybersecurity. A lot of the antivirus software that we use now that's deployed in a lot of the networks, they're using some form of AI for behavioral detection. It's looking for anomalies. And in this part, they're kind of updating their tactics and they're trying to get up to date with the times. They're using AI to now help automate some of their functions where they're able to hit 3, 5, maybe even 10 times the amount of people that they can every single day that they couldn't do before AI came out.
Yeah, the pen testing, a simple walkthrough on how that's done. What are the steps that's involved in that? Um, First of all, the first steps is reconnaissance. Needs a list of devices to include what we're scanning, list of IPs that are going to be addressed in the search and the scan. If they're going to be printers included, do they need to be included? Are there any switches that might be vulnerable or facing the internet? Or devices that are really important that should be included into the scan? All that needs to be encompassed in the reconnaissance to find out whether or not they should be included in the pen testing. Once all that is done, that information is entered into whatever system that's being used for the penetration testing, so that all the prep work is done on the back end. And in that point, in that stage, we go on to the next step where scanning and enumeration is done. We scan through all the devices, finding the vulnerabilities and what open ports are there, any credentials available to be addressed and tested against. Those are some of the things that going through the pen testing and prepping for it, and once all those information is entered, then the next step is for the penetration tool to start taking advantage and try to find those vulnerabilities and exploit what it can, finding out easy passwords, what can it access through those passwords that are found during the scanning and enumeration phase. Are any ports can it enter the system, the network, or through the internet or your firewall from the ports that it found in the previous step. Um, and see what it can do and how far it can go past your network. Once it does that, then comes a reporting stage. And then in the reporting stage, what it does, a good vulnerability scanning software or system would put together the report, find out where the weaknesses were, how you can fix them, what passwords were used to exploit the system, and what systems it was managed to attack. And if any Windows updates that needed to be done, Linux updates, whatever updates that need to be applied, and hopefully using this reporting, you can plug all these holes. As a real world case study, we had a company engage us on doing some penetration testing for them. It was mostly for insurance requirements, and they wanted to make sure that there were no significant vulnerabilities on their network. And during the engagement, what we did was our security team reached out to them, coordinated with the internal IT team, and done vulnerability scans and penetration testing. And some of the things that came up were very interesting. They weren't too significant, but some of them were interesting nonetheless. One of the things was their ADP system was actually accessible via the internet, their security system, which was a big no-no because otherwise, a hacker can disable their security systems in their cameras and what have you. And some of those are just one of the vulnerabilities that could be found in the penetration testing. Other systems that were found to be was weak passwords. Some users had 5-digit passcodes. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm exaggerating here, but that was just very something similar, and it took advantage of that and accessed one or two of the PCs in the network.
That's my luggage pin number.
Yes, there you go, Spaceballs.
Yeah.
So those are the things that the vulnerability and penetration testing can find. I mean, there's so many tools that are on the network that we don't even conceive of that could be an issue. Like we were discussing earlier, it could be CNC machines on that you are utilized. IP cameras, thermostats. The thermostats is one of those things you can't even phantom that could be accessible via the internet or vulnerability testing that can access the network. But you have things like what is the Google Nest? That's on the network, and that could be vulnerable, especially if it's not secured. So those are some of the things that we've run into, and the reporting comes back, and we have to figure out what is the best solutions and help the company uh, tighten down the network and secure them.
Some of the other things that people don't really think about too is, everything that's connected.
Yes.
Time clocks, PFOB systems, network surveillance systems, including security cameras, any type of phones or tablets. And this isn't necessarily exclusive to cell phones, like smartphones, but also desktop phones that are VoIP enabled, voice over IP. Everything that pulls information from your network is a potential vulnerability. Even printers, network attached storage. So we don't think about this, and this is one of the reasons why they want to see penetration tests done on an annual basis, because throughout the year, you could be having a vendor change out some equipment, or you could have multiple vendors changing out equipment, and those vendors are not talking to each other. So new devices can be introduced throughout the year on the network, and not even your own IT department may even be aware of it, right? So a lot of the times, these penetration tests kind of give like a baseline where it shows you all the devices that are on a network. It then gets a report to see what's exploitable, and it says, hey, we might potentially have new device on this network. Maybe it's a new security system that you bought or you're using, and now we need to figure out a plan to be able to secure that on the network. Either we have to isolate it from the rest of the network so it's not accessible from your regular computer systems, or we have to put in network segmentation. Whatever the case may be, a lot of the time those systems need to be separated from your actual computer systems. This way, if somebody is successful in getting into your network, at least we're able to isolate them so it minimizes them traveling laterally throughout your network.
Here's a good example too. What penetration testing can find. During our engagement with one of our customers, our team found that there was a Windows XP machine still in the network that no one knew existed. Um, and that's a machine that's over 15, 20 years old and, and full of vulnerabilities. So testing can also find, devices that shouldn't be, or somewhere that someone forgot about, left on with no security at all. So those are the type of findings that are important that can come up during a test that you had no clue.
Legacy systems tend to be a big one. They always pop up on there and like, oh, I forgot
Yeah.
we were running that system. We had a contract with that 15 years ago and we have to move off of it or we haven't decommissioned it. If it's connected to the network, it's a potential vulnerability, and that a lot of the times can be the weakest link on an attacker being able to get into a system.
So, what are some of the ways you can protect yourself? And prior to vulnerability patching, penetration testing, um, are be proactive on your network, and in your business environment. Make sure your IT team or your MSP is doing vulnerability patches on a regular basis. Um, Windows updates, firmware updates, things like that. That's important to patch your systems. Um, Other things you could do is implement multi-form factor authentication. That's just like you do with your banking systems. I'm sure you get that two factor ID code that gets to your cell phone, or an email that gives you the 5-digit number that you have to put into your logon. Those are what second form factors can do. Other things is making sure that your team is trained up on security awareness. How they understand vulnerabilities, how to identify spam emails that are coming in. Training and education is also a key factor in helping your team and your network um, be safe.
What you want to do is limit access to the resources on your network. So if users don't need to have access to certain folders, files, computers, servers, uh, your IT team should absolutely have separate groups that do need access to the resources that are needed for employees to work, and then the other employees would not have access to these same groups. So that's something that should be analyzed as well to better uh, protect your data information in your network.
Yeah, good housekeeping on your network is important as well. You got employees who leave. You want to make sure those accounts are disabled. You want to make sure there's nothing lingering that they can access once they leave, or resign or retire, what have you. You want to do good housekeeping in those areas as well. It's important that who doesn't belong there is kept out. Keeping software and devices up to date as well, making sure that you're patching your your QuickBooks every year, and your PDF Acrobat PDF readers up to date, because they put out patches and things like that might be vulnerable and lead you to an attack.
Another good tip is, this is kind of, you know, a pre-planning stage, is to have an incident response plan. Have a list of key point of contacts that are the first people that should be contacted first when there is some kind of an anomaly or a breach that's on the network. Have a game plan in place on what to do next, who to contact, have contacts within the insurance company in case you have to engage their team as well. And the other thing is too is perhaps maybe an annual fire drill might not be a terrible idea, just to kind of figure out, say, hey, if we run a simulation and say, let's say we were attacked at 12 p.m. on so and so date, what is the response? How is the response time? Who do we contact first? And depending on the nature of the attack, who do we have to engage? Which teams do we have to engage? Do we have to get HR involved? Is it potential as an issue where it could be an employee or an ex-employee that may have been either laid off or let go? It could be an issue where it could be a phishing email that came into HR. Perhaps it was an ACH transfer. We've seen this before too, when it's very big with fraud. We've seen attackers even go to the farthest extents as to trying to mimic an employee and opening up a bank account in their name and then trying to change the direct deposit for their payroll. So I think there has to be some kind of plan that's in place depending on what type of breach it is. If it's an accounting issue, obviously the point of contact should be on the accounting list or HR, accounts receivable, accounts payable. If it's something that's more serious where it brings the entire network down, obviously owners, key decision makers, influencers, anybody that's part of those teams should also be involved in those lists. So those are the kind of things you have to think about now before everything goes on fire.
Exactly. And if those things do happen, you should also have a plan in place. Is okay, can we recover from this? And how do we recover from this? And that's like having a plan B in place. If worst case scenario, how can we recover? That's something you also have to have in your back pocket as well, something to consider.
By having a plan in place, you will recover quicker than being disorganized. So it's always good to have a basic response of what to do if something happens, so the employees know what to do and who to contact.
Thanks for tuning in, and as always, stay secure out there. Head over to on-siteTechnology.com/pentest or click the link below in the description to schedule a call with our team. For a limited time, get 20% off your first penetration test. No pressure, just smart planning.
That's a wrap.
Stay tuned for episode 3.
Cut.